This is part A of the KhoodeelaarTV television channel being broadcast only online on the internet from London. And this is approximately 10 minutes past 9 in the morning in London, 0910 hours GMT on Monday, the 15th of March 2021. We are focusing on the murder of Sarah Everard and the peaceful vigil in her honor and memory, and in support of the demand for safety for women in the streets of the UK, London and UK. And we are following up on the campaign for justice for the girls, the children in Tower Hamlets, London, East London in the UK within quotation marks. And we are continuing the campaign, questions for Tower Hamlets Council, which let down the children, betrayed the girls, neglected the girls, and completely failed to carry out its, that is, Tower Hamlets, the local council's duties, legal duties, and we can add other duties contextually, social duties, moral duties, ethical duties, humanitarian duties, but essentially, these girls, let's say 4 of them, these children, the 3 girls that were photographed together, and the photograph was published for the first time, to our knowledge, in February 2015, as the girls were seen either entering or leaving an airport in Turkey. Now, these children and the other girl who was a child as well, who had reportedly left for Syria in 2014, so it was just one calendar year before. And the girls are now kind of, in terms of data, in terms of statistics, in terms of currently accessible, publicly accessible information, those girls are now represented or identified by the image of Shamima Begum, whose image has been printed as a big-sized image today in the propaganda daily, the Daily Borisgraph. And this is something that we will comment on in terms of the contents of the piece that is printed on page 13, I think, under dispatch or dispatches by the Telegraph reporter or Telegraph writer, who says that he spoke to Shamima Begum. He met Shamima Begum yesterday, Sunday, the 14th of March, in the refugee camp or the detention camp that she has been staying in or existing in within Syria. And he says that she didn't agree to be recorded, but she did obviously speak to him. And the other thing is that, of course, she is now kind of appearing in this picture that the Telegraph or the Borisgraph has published today. And the headline is that she is looking west. That is to say that Shamima Begum is not wearing the previous kind of clothing or dress that she had been wearing. So this is the picture, which is very different, very, very different indeed from all the pictures that have been published, or at least the ones that we have seen so far. And we can only access what is publicly available in the public domain. So this is Shamima Begum, according to the claim in the Daily Borisgraph, which is the Telegraph. And the Details we shall discuss later. And this picture is in contrast to every other image, every image that kind of has been seen of Shamima Begum. Yes, it's page 13. And the page 13 item is headed, Begum rejects IS dress code as she looks to the west. So that's the page 13 kind of full item. Page 13 of the daily Boris propaganda graph, Boris graph. And it's a piece by somebody called Campbell McDiarmid. Campbell McDiarmid is described as being in Roj camp, northeast Syria. And it's across the whole page, across the top half of the page 13 of the Boris propaganda graph. And he says that the camp manager, Nora Abdo, said the British women routinely declined media requests on advice from their lawyers. They were well behaved and caused no problem, she added. Women in the camp ranged from those who remained committed IS ideologues and those who had totally rejected the dogma. But Miss Abdo said the general trend was towards a rejection of the group. We have noticed the change in their clothing, she said. They want to come home. They say they're ready to pay the punishment for their crimes. Some are thinking about the future for their kids. And he also mentions another woman who is a research fellow at Harvard University. So there are lots of people kind of following and researching and investigating these women, including, of course, Shamima Begum. Now, our campaign for justice for Shamima Begum, as we have been saying, concerns the period, let's say, up to the time when they ceased to be children. But they were children up to the time whatever the dates were. And it starts from October 2010. And we have explained that, and we shall continue to explain that in order to put everything in context. Now, what we are saying is that Tower Hamlets Council has got two distinct sets of duties. It is the duty now to retrieve this child, this Shamima Begum, from that camp. Nothing to do with whatever the so-called Shamima Begum lawyer is saying or is not saying. Our campaign is saying the Tower Hamlets Council owes the duty to this person, Shamima Begum, for her safety. Because whatever this Telegraph piece is saying is not all the facts. And it cannot be taken for granted at all whatsoever that Shamima Begum should be allowed to stay in that camp any longer. That's the demand we are putting to Tower Hamlets Council again today. And we shall be elaborating on the details and the reasons why. And the other period, the period now that she's facing is risky, dangerous, and also it's a direct consequence, directly caused by the Tower Council's failures and negligence, while Shamima Begum and the other children, the other girls, were actually children only 2.5 years ago. And the reason why we have said that it's starting from, let's say, October 2010, the main reason is that October would have been there, I mean, they would have been, these children would have been 10 years old. And I'm making an informed guess about that because any children, any younger age, younger than 10, would be very unlikely to understand the various issues, whatever the issues were, involved in their kind of being led astray, whatever the contracts, whatever the connections. So let's say age 10 is a reasonably practical kind of starting point when they would have been contacted or they would have been subjected to whatever process they were subjected to. And we're saying that during those years, starting from the age of 10 and 2010, up to the time when they actually carried out or implemented whatever plan or plot was kind of agreed or conveyed to them, and they understood it to the extent that they actually appeared on the other side of the kind of oceans and appeared as filmed and photographed at an airport or described as an airport in Turkey on their way to Syria. So what Shamima Begum has been going through now, whatever the losses she has been going through now and damages and anxieties and stress and distress and everything, and the risk, the danger she faces are directly caused by and consequences of Tower Hamlets Council failing its duties that it owed to her and the other girls. So these, in short, are the two kind of headings of the campaign today at this stage. And the rest of the contents of this Campbell McDermott's piece is continuing the narrative of the so-called British media being in denial, because they're not referring to Tower Hamlets Council at all. They're not referring to any negligence, any safeguarding duty negligence done by Tower Hamlets Council, negligence shown by Tower Hamlets Council, let alone any illegality and the unconstitutionality, brutality, racism, racist discrimination, anti-Muslim hostility and hatred shown by and operated by the two Home Secretaries. One was the one that took away her British citizenship she had by birth, and the other is the current one who is fronting the attacks on her rights and the various rubber stamping kind of tokenistic jobs that the court system has done so far to kind of illegally collude in the illegal agenda and process and procedures of the UK domestic service, which is the Home Office, and anybody else from the unknown, unidentified kind of security services who in any way gave the advice to take away the citizenship of Shamima Begum has, of course, in the singular or in the plural, whatever the number of people involved at whatever stages, whatever stage of the line of command in the security service organizations, all of them are to be held liable for letting down Shamima Begum and breaking the law and the legal obligations that they owed as being employees of the state that owed and still owes the duties as part of the international obligations directly arising from and resulting from and linked to the UK's continuing status as the signatory to the international conventions, international agreements, international charters, including the charters, founding charters and declarations of the United Nations Organization, and of course the various derived duties based on the agencies of the United Nations, including the Human Rights Commission and the Refugee Convention and all the other things. Now, there has been not a single kind of sound from Tower Hamlets Councillor, not a single sound from Tower Hamlets councillors. So we shall be talking more about that in due course and in context. As far as the campaign for justice for Sarah Everard, I mean, that campaign, as I said yesterday, that campaign or that movement, whether it's formally called a movement or a campaign, is less important than the actual ongoing, active, dynamic, made up of, consisting of people, human beings, women and men. That campaign or movement will only succeed in bringing about severe, serious, and seriously overdue changes that transforms the identity and the appearance and the conduct, role, and behavior of the police beyond recognition. Beyond recognition, I'm saying in the context of the brutality that the Metropolitan Police inflicted on the women, mainly, let's say, the women, on Saturday in Clapham Common and around area. And we shall go to the coverage in the Fleet Street papers today about that in more detail than we have done on Shamima Begum so far in terms of time spent in the discussion. Now, the overwhelming view of the ordinary people sympathetic to, ordinary rational people sympathetic with to the women who are protesting, showing respect for the victim of the murder and abduction. And it is possible, but I'm not saying it has been admitted by the kind of police or whoever disclosed the information about Sarah Everard. Maybe she was sexually assaulted, even raped. I mean, the motivation for murdering her must be connected with some kind of sexual assault, quite apart from the kidnapping, which is itself a sexual assault, but actual rape and sexual abuse and other things must be kind of included among the things that will be revealed in due course during the process of the trial and evidence. And so whatever the details of the brutalities and the murder and the possible rape and sexual assault, the women who organized and kind of called for and rallied to show honor and respect to the victim, Sarah Everard, committed no crime. They did protest and they did mourning and they did vigil. They did bouquets of flowers. They brought bouquets of flowers. How did all these things become criminal? How did all of these become criminals and crimes? And so therefore, something very rare in terms of all the combination of all these factors has happened. And the only way forward is to make these combination of events be useful to end the policing as we have known it so far and produce new, seriously new kind of policing. Whether that will succeed or not is another kind of part of the investigation and the commentary. But the bill that is now being tabled by the Conservatives, by Boris Johnson, by Priti Patel, giving more powers to the police is the last thing that society needs. Even if you take into account all the various violent things that have happened in London, let's say London, over the last 100 years, I'm not talking about the last week or last year or last decade. I'm talking about the last 100 years, last 100 years. Every time something has happened which has been kind of violent, has been followed by ordinary public being encouraged to express solidarity with the police in tackling the violence and all the other things. Now that has been part of the role that the media has played. The media has played the part of fueling, encouraging, inciting even, praise and expressions of gratitude to the police in a way that has suggested that the police were doing society a favor by doing their job. Remember what I'm saying. If police do their job and protect the public, it's not a favor they're doing to the people. That is their job. Never forget that. That is their job. It's a bonus if members of the public or people claiming to be members of the public or representatives of the members of the public, like members of parliament, then add a thank you to the police for doing the job. That is a bonus. But that is not compulsory, and that is not mandatory, and that is not necessary. But in a genuinely kind of tolerant and respectful society, people doing jobs that are parts of their jobs or their duties are often thanked. And that is absolutely how it should be. It is giving thanks voluntarily, not as part of a duty of any sort. Because of the nature of the jobs, people in the fire kind of service, and people in the police, people in the National Health Service, hospitals, emergency services of other types and descriptions are often treated with additional kind of deference by the institutions of society, and are paid way above the average remunerations because of the various risks involved in their jobs. So it's not like the police, when they do the duty, for example, when an explosion happens on a London bridge or something, or another explosion happens somewhere else or similar, then they're actually immediately thanked by the politicians in place or other senior post-holding personnel, issuing the kind of fast comments after the events. And that actually shows that the people in posts, say for example an executive kind of decision maker, say I'd like to thank the police for their job, does that as a kind of bonus. It's not a duty on the part of that person to thank the police. For example, at at the end of the conclusions of elections and counts, the winner or the victorious candidate or candidates often start the first paragraph of the first speech post-election by thanking the police. This is not something that they have to do, because police are paid to do what they do. And what they did in the context of the election, if you like, or the counting and the polling booth and polling station safety and security. And any overtime or extra time that the police woman or policeman is asked to kind of give in the context of an election or similar temporary emergency is more than adequately kind of compensated for by that being given money and additional thanks, of course. So it's not like the police on Saturday were doing a thankless job. They weren't. They were on ordinary kind of duties. And I'm sure, depending on the various contracts or contractual terms, they were getting a bonus, whatever the amount. Even if they weren't getting a huge bonus, they were getting any bonus, some bonus at least. But they were definitely getting paid. They were not doing any job, or they were not being around the Clapham Common on Saturday without getting duly paid. So there was nothing that anyone in the public, in the community, among the vigil supporters or vigil participants did to take away from the police any of their rights, any of their obligations, or any of their privileges, because the police have got the unlimited discretionary powers to do anything they think will help prevent crime and make people safe. So, what was it on Saturday that made the police attack these protesters? I mean, the woman whose picture has now become very well publicized around the world has been identified now as Patsy. Patsy Stevenson has been reported in the Times that we have already noted. And Patsy Stevenson, according to the Times, says that she was just standing there when she was attacked, or she was held, or she was arrested, or she was detained, whatever. Now, this is a young person. She's not black, she's not African, she's not kind of Asian, but apparently she looks like an Anglo-Saxon woman of, she's under 30 years old, let's say. And so she was standing there and she was attacked by the police. Now, this is absolutely the opposite of what the police should be doing, ever, at any time. They must not pounce on a person standing at a vigil. I mean, that goes without saying, but the fact that it did happen is extraordinary evidence that the police are no longer justifiable or justified in even notionally saying the phrase policing, that they're doing the policing by consent. There would be no consent by Patsy Stevenson to be manhandled and pushed to the ground by male police person, or even by female police person. But the ones that are coming across in the pictures as attacking her, holding her down, are mainly men, and they're all white men as far as the pictures suggest. Of course, we haven't got a kind of full view of the context of the photographs and all the angles. So we don't know that the attacking male police persons were all white. It is notionally possible that a few police persons present might be from the African Caribbean background. But it's not certain because it has not been disclosed. Full contextual photographs have not been published yet that we can access. So having said all of that, what does British policing mean? Because of empire and imperialism, the phrase British police was foisted on millions of people's conscience across Africa and Asia for decades. And like Thomas Babington's Racist Education Act of the 1830s about India, the image of the British police has been imposed as part of the imperialist brainwashing of the colonized and empire-assaulted, empire-subjected peoples of Africa and Asia. And a whole mountain of praise for the competence and the neutrality of the British police has been perpetrated and peddled, and it is still being perpetrated and peddled in large parts of Asia and large parts of Africa. So, this is not going to be possible from now on if the referencing to the Metropolitan Police and the London Police, the English police, etc., collectively, if the references, the referencing or mentions of the police attacking women protesters on Saturday, if those facts are made known to the people in Africa and Asia. And as Tim Stanley confesses in the Boris propaganda graph today, Monday the 15th of March 2021. He says, and it's kind of trailed on the front page. At the bottom of the front page is a comment piece that Tim Stanley has written. And the heading here on the front page, the Sussex's interview has had real effects that tarnish the monarchy. I remember anyone watching this program will have seen that after the Oprah Winfrey interview, Brenda, that is Queen Elizabeth II, is not going to be the same person again in terms of the image. That image that was guarded, overly guarded under the various myths and mythologies that were intentionally created to give Brenda an image and a kind of persona that was absolutely untruthful and untrue, but always helped her maintain the business of being the monarch and protect her wealth, etc. Now that image of Brenda, whatever the image had been until the Meghan interview was broadcast, that image of Brenda, aka Queen Elizabeth II, has been shattered. And we have been saying that because we have been saying so many similar evidential fact-based things about the role of the monarch, the Queen Elizabeth II, for so long, that it was part of our knowledge base that automatically gave rise to that conclusion, that's it. This interview on Oprah, or this interview of Meghan and Harry, conducted by Oprah Winfrey and aired by CBS in the USA, is bringing an end to the reign of Brenda Elizabeth II, as she had been known until the interview was broadcast. on the Sunday. And remember what Fleet Street had said boastfully before the airing of the interview with Oprah, that Brenda wasn't going to even watch that program. I mean, the scorn, the contempt, the hostility, the rejection, the dismissal, and the dismissive attitude by Brenda as attributed to her by the servile and anti-Meghan and pro-racist Fleet Street papers, all of them kind of shouted that no, Her Majesty is not going to even watch the program. And days later, she was reported by the same lying papers that she notes the concern. Okay, that is a diluted kind of version, but that is the opposite of her not watching it, or opposite of her not even wanting to watch it, because it was beneath watching. It was completely too low, too bad, too poor, too unappealing, too unattractive for the monarch to watch. And 24 hours later, the monarch says she understood the concerns. I mean, that exposes the complete corruption of Fleet Street, complete racist corruption of Fleet Street, and the unfitness for purpose. Purpose that is kind of peddled as being addressed by Brenda being in the post of the monarch that she has been for decades. That Brenda has been unfit for purpose because Brenda has not behaved neutrally. And Brenda has not behaved in a way that a modern constitutional monarch should have behaved. Because, as we have been saying, the interview with Oprah, whatever the name of the platform, the interview with Oprah on CNN, CBS, or any channel, whatever, it doesn't matter. The Oprah kind of, the name Oprah, the business kind of profile of Oprah in the business is an established one in the sense that she conducts intensive interviews and brings about revelations that her rivals don't bring about and don't kind of claim to be able to bring about. So she has a distinctive, identifiable profile on television interviews. And for that reason, when she does carry out an interview like the one that was aired by American television on Sunday, not yesterday Sunday, but the Sunday before, automatically receives a very high audience. It may not be the highest audience, 17 million, but it is a high audience. And by the nature of the organizations of the television franchising, right across the world, an Oprah interview is purchased by many kind of programs and stations. So although the British papers are saying that the Oprah interview with Meghan and Harry was watched by 50 million people worldwide, I think that's a very small number of the actual number of people that watched it. And I'm not going to go into the details of digital explanation, but logically and otherwise, compared to other kind of events and issues that are attracting significant viewership, this one would have far exceeded all the others combined. So I come back to Tim Stanley in the Telegraph. that is the Boris graph, or Boris propaganda graph. And Tim Stanley is the writer of the Boris propaganda sheet's editorial comments. He doesn't just write that, he also writes comments with his name, and he appears on Sky News and BBC television news channels, amongst other places, amongst the South, North American kind of outlets. And he comments on newspapers, Fleet Street newspapers, on the BBC and the Sky News slots that he does appear in. So Tim Stanley is a known kind of member of Fleet Street. And before this today, I have been saying right from the beginning that this Oprah interview has destroyed Brenda like no other. And this will not be the kind of thing to recover from. It will be decline from the royal family from now on. Because the people across the world, the vast majority of people, even in the USA and in the UK, can readily identify the expression, the word racism. And it's not something that even in the UK, which is a very racist, which has a very racist media, and of course the racist monarch and the racist government, that this particular kind of attack via the Oprah Winfrey interview that has been mounted on Brenda is a point of no return, if you like, because Brenda cannot go on with this kind of monarchy, and it has to either be scrapped or be completely replaced. Replaced by what kind of monarchy is, of course, an issue only to be seen. We can't predict exactly how the sequences will occur. I mean, Brenda either retires, steps down, and is followed by Brian as the monarch. How long Brian will stay in that post is not certain. And then, of course, Brian is followed by Williams, Brian's Charles's elder son. So whoever gets into the monarchy after whoever else, the monarchy, the British monarchy, is now firmly identified as a racist monarchy. And the fact that in the USA, because of historical reasons, the majority of the black people, like African origin and people from Caribbean and through Caribbean, many of the people are descendants of these kind of Africans kept in slavery by the whites in the USA. It's a large vocal collection of children and descendants of slaves are absolutely mentally, intellectually united in their condemnation of Brenda. Now, that number is not only significantly bigger than anything you can find in the UK itself, but it's many times more influential in terms of the political kind of power basis in the USA, despite the fact that Charlie Hebdo was murdered by the police and all the other outstanding claims against racist police and policing and racist decision makers. But this one, the people, the inmates that have become aware of what Meghan told Oprah and what the television channel, whichever channel did this, broadcast it. And this has become a big not just one-off thing. It's the biggest talking point among black people in the USA, which has never been in that situation regarding Britain. Because whatever the black people in the USA talked about in relation to Britain and British affairs simply disappears in comparison with the Meghan claim that she was racistly attacked and bullied and harassed and cornered by Brenda, and Brenda's family failed to help her. Now, that is not some kind of secretive memo. It is her telling that she felt so bad and helpless that she thought she would commit suicide. It is a very bad, very serious issue, and a very serious sign of the racist disaster that Brenda's family has been and Brenda's monarchy has been. So then let's move from there to Shamima Begum. I mean, Shamima Begum is not even half white and half kind of Bangladeshi. Shamima Begum is wholly Bangladeshi origin, British-born person. And the treatment she has been given is not just the rubber stamping by the Supreme Court for the Home Office, but it's the tone, it's the language, it's the kind of imagery and the comparisons that have been made within the courts against Shamima Begum that give away the game. That all these court decisions and the public references by the mainstream media and others against Shamima Begum have been orchestrated by racists somewhere. Somewhere in one place or another, they were kind of clearly active in the writing of the script that the Supreme Court President read out. That statement doesn't read like a judge's or a judicial statement, let's say. Anyone who wants to delve deeper into this thing that I'm saying about judicial language can look up the judicial language on Wikipedia or something. And they will find many references that link them to other resources, and they can find the details. I have said before that the President of the Supreme Court, came across as a racist and also as a moron, because he came across as not being even aware, let alone being actively compliant with the many international treaty agreements, conventions that were all applicable to the UK, because the UK is signatory to all of them. And I'm saying that most of the human rights ones, most of the ones about due process, are at the top of the actual evidence pile, because all of those conventions, agreements, treaties, etc., that the UK remains obliged to implement were treated with contempt by Reid, who didn't even mention any of them, any of the obligations, any of the treaties, any of the charters, any of the actual decisions that in the past have taken place, even through the court system, where objectively referred to human rights of the people kind of denied their rights by the Supreme Court, the court system, or by the government in the UK, have been found to have been illegal, unlawful. Of course, everyone knows that Sajid Javid's removal of Shamima Begum's citizenship by birth constitutes a glaring example of why Sajid Javid was a coconut and why the Home Office is completely unfit for purpose. And why, therefore, whoever is leading the so-called Labour Party opposition should be sacked. Because after Saturday, the actual quality of civilization or civil society in this country has been dealt a deadly blow. And if the new extra powers bill in the House of Commons today, if it gets any support, then free speech and freedom of assembly, peaceful protest will disappear from Britain. And this is the kind of seriousness of the issue. And I don't believe that the MPs who are on the record as preparing to vote against the bill that extends the powers of the police and diminishes any right to assembly and right to protest, I don't think they will defeat this. But outside of Parliament, the opponents of this bill must solidarize and unify with the rest of the protesting public. And there must be a movement to get rid of the idea, the package, most of which is sexist and undoubtedly racist and corrupt. All the packages that are supposedly the kind of repository and the kind of archives and the sources for the kind of identification of the role of the police, these should be replaced radically. I use the word radically to mean totally, significantly, not in any way connected with any radicalization. Now, who will be leading the show? Who will be leading the kind of movement in Parliament to produce a properly transparent bill that is about ending the reign of police abusing their powers without any accountability? So what we'll be doing, we'll be continuing the discussion and diagnosis, and we shall be talking about Charlie Hebdo and Shamima Begum, and we shall be updating on the demands for Town Council to deliver its duties to Shamima Begum and start by rescuing her from Syria now, and then delivering all the damages and compensations and costs that they owe to her.